Welcome back to the Flow Sports Fix. The Flowman, we know how much he loves his footy, especially his country footy, and right now he's looking back to look forward.
This is a look at some of what happened last year. With COVID-19, most competitions were facing no program at all, and many decided to curtail the season and abandon play. Others went ahead, and in the Limestone Coast region, a league was formed, the Limestone Coast Football League. It comprised of three Mount Gambier clubs, Kalangadoo out of mid-southeast, and Mundalla out of the K&T, and also was Kaibibolite, the other Tiger club that joined the Limestone Coast out of K&T. It was a very shortened season, but it got them off the ground and got those clubs playing some football, whereas the other teams in those particular areas didn't participate, and for obvious reasons K&T and the Western Border didn't have football because they contained the Victorian-based sides in their competition, and that is still the same given that the border districts in K&T are still in K&T, albeit Canaiva has moved over to Horsham District, and then of course in Western Border Casterton is involved in that competition. It then begs the question with the leagues going back to normal this year and starting up again pretty soon as we see programs emerging across these areas, as to what is the future in Limestone Coast football and indeed in other parts of the state, given what we've seen on the Eyre Peninsula of amalgamation of competitions, and that happening a bit sooner than what they had projected 2022 as the year, but having those now appear to be going ahead in 2021 subject to SANFL community football approval. So we have the look at is there room for amalgamation of sides in the southeast? I think that there's less room for it to occur there than probably anywhere else in South Australia, because we generally have better populations and higher rainfall, and therefore a more closer demographic of townships to each other. But then one looks at the Mallee and the context of keeping football going, with Murrayville as a factor, the situation with the Murraylands and River Murray, and then the Riverland and then Riverland Independent. It's a wide area, that Mallee area, and there are long distances to travel if one is looking to cover football, say from a team like Meningie, which is in River Murray, and then looking at, say, Canalpin and Tintinara, which are the side that plays out of the Dukes Highway, and then moving forward to teams on the border of the Mallee like Pinaroo and Murrayville, and then going further north 100 plus kilometres, and in some cases 150 kilometres across to, say, Blanchetown, Swanreach or Sedan, Cambrai, or up as far then as Ramco in that area where you've got Riverland football being played. And this becomes the question for administrators. How do we keep football on the park? Mallee football currently plays with a grade, a B grade, and then it has its senior colts competition with an unaffiliated junior colts, which run for a few weeks leading into the finals, and then they do play the four finals on the final series with those clubs. In some cases, some teams just simply haven't got the ability to put a team into that junior colt type age group. But this will be a very interesting year for Mallee football. It's going to be covered both here on the radio, as we have for the past 19 seasons, and on a new facility that has been put together by the MFL TV and the Maryland Sporting Results Group, which have put together a trailer and the ability to stream that up onto social media platforms on the Saturday match of the round each weekend. And we'll be joining Bruce and his team in commentary, Jason and myself, at different times through the season, along with a terrific two-camera setup for filming, and they're going to be very excited about getting out to the Mallee football grounds. But these are new initiatives. We're putting more into coverage and more into serving, but the dollars and cents have to still be there. And the teams have still got to be able to play against each other and have the numbers to play, and this will become a very real question asked, I think, over the next 12 months as football gets back and started in 2021, as to where we are with numbers and so on after the COVID-19 situation. Seems to be a lot of enthusiasm about, but are there the numbers for our competitions to continue the way they have for these past 25 or so years?
Numbers will be important this year and going forward, and there's some other aspects to the numbers conversation that I know the Flowman wants to address, but we might have to leave that for another day. The COVID-19 protocols, what are their impacts on our local footy this year? The Flowman's going to give us the details.
And these protocols have got a number of aspects to them that have been handed down by the Victorian government. And in order to play effectively, the agreement has to be reached by each league and each club within that league that they will abide by what are the COVID-19 protocols. The big one is 1,000 people be allowed to come into the grounds. Now, if you have football, netball and hockey, say like North Central have, then is that 1,000 people across the football ground, or is it in the aligned hockey field that may be at the back of the ground? Is it including the tennis courts or the netball courts area? There is then the additional factor with those 1,000 people of what those 1,000 people are allowed to do when in the ground. But just to bear a thought here for the gatekeepers. They're going to have to be able to number the people. And when you get a travelling crowd of a good club, say like the Old United Kangas in Sunraysia, travel pretty well. And if the home club were to have over 500 people, that are that non-playing people, so this is 1,000 people plus the players, I might add, then you would then end up with more than 1,000 people. So who gets let in? First serve. Then how do gatekeepers keep the public out who are lining up in their cars down the road, presumably across into main roads, quite often where gates are not too far from a main intersection and so on. So these become traffic and transportation issues. There's a security issue of, say, there's 1,000 in the ground. Who is responsible for making sure that security is obtained? And I mean, most of our country grounds don't have a high fence with barbed wire. I mean, somebody can go to the northern end, and Jimmy Bloggs' farm is at the northern end, and just climb the fence. Yeah, anyway, you know where I'm going with that. And what about the other restrictions? Across Victoria and New South Wales, there'll be restrictions for the spectators not being allowed onto the playing surface at any of the breaks. And then you have the COVID-19 inside distancing protocols. So that means that when you have a club room where you have, say, all the honour boards and the bar there, and you have the tables set up for the meals to come out after the game, only 100 allowed in there. And the protocols that surround those 100 people inside the club room are quite significant. I mean, you have to have masks being worn on indoor settings, and that's an important one. You need to have a COVID-safe plan, and you need to nominate at least one COVID safety officer who has undertaken the Australian Government infection control training. And the club rooms where the players change, or the change rooms, if you like, are not permitted for any non-official or player to be allowed into those club rooms. And that is something important to bear in mind. And when you start to look at who's permitted to come in and out of those locations, that they have to have badging and so forth that identifies them as legitimately being able to be out on the field or in a club room for the purpose of being an official, maybe a health or massage, or maybe a person who does property steward. Those things are going to have to be all taken care of. So there's a lot to think about to start the season, but the big issue, I think, is still where people are so excited to get back, and the events that I've already attended that have been allowed to start leading into this season. And you look at Easter weekends in some of our geographic areas where you've got big populations coming that are tourist populations that turn up at the local footy game for that big Easter crowd. Well, they're going to have just 1,000 people. And I know of some, I think down in Phillip Island, there's one situation down that way where they get probably 4,000 to 5,000 people to that particular Easter game. Well, that's not going to happen this year. It means that what might have been a gate taking, a bar facility and a bar amount of money sold that may pay for the club to continue its operations, and when their normal attendances are significantly lower, well, that's not going to be allowed to happen in season 2021.
And I don't think that's the end of that conversation regarding the protocols and their impact on our local country footy and other sports throughout this year. The Flowman, he'll have more on that, I'm sure, in the weeks coming up. And coming up still tonight on the Flow Sports Fix, looking at teams in Tassie, the Northern Territory, and the Poms are not too happy. What's it all about? We'll find out when we check in with the stat man.